Hi, I'm Adam Summer. You're listening to the Yerushalmi Talk podcast with the support of the Yeshivat Devar Yerushalayim in Har Nof, Jerusalem. This is Kilayim, Chapter 4, Halacha 6. This is part 2 of the shiur. And today we're doing it from the yeshiva and the kollel here at Devar Yerushalayim. So the background sound are the people learning in the kollel. Today we're on Art Scroll 43b2, and we're getting to the second part of the Mishnah. That's going to be the final part with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. This is part 2 of the shiur. And the idea over with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, it looks like they're disagreeing with the Tanna Kamma, where it's saying that even if somebody plants his vineyard, where it could be 3 or more rows of vines at 8 intervals, it would be permitted. That is going to be a big hiddush. Now, keep in mind, the Tanna Kamma were saying 16. That means that more than 16 amos is going to be for these 3 sets of vines, where you can plant foreign seed there, but certainly 16 or fewer amos is going to be where you cannot. Now, there's going to be a question that comes up with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. Could it be that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, the Tanaim, are talking about outside of the land? That, is a very lenient position. So the Gemara is going to try to clarify this leniency, and there's 2 main opinions that come up. One is going to be more stringent, and that's going to be now with Rabbi Yonah. Rabbi Yonah says the name of Rav, and it says when Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir say it is permitted, they mean only that the foreign seed planted there is permitted for benefit after the fact, but they agree that initially it is prohibited to plant foreign seed between the rows spaced only 8 amos apart. Now, the Chazan Ish in his Kilayim 10:11 book, Sefer, is going to note that according to this interpretation by Rabbi Yonah, which is going to be the strict opinion, the Tanna Kamma is going to dispute Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, and they're going to be saying that 3 rows spaced less than 16 amos apart constitute a vineyard in all respects, to the extent that even after the fact, foreign seed planted between such rows will be prohibited for benefit. And that certainly stands at odds with the assertion that we covered yesterday in part 1 of the shiur of Rabbi Lazar, where the rows spaced from 8 to 16 amos apart constitute a vineyard to prohibit foreign planting between them, but not to forbid the produce of such planting after the fact. So, you could look at the wording used by Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, where even if one plants his vineyard at 8 amos intervals, it would be permitted, and you could say that, well, maybe that's having this implication, says the Mara Fulda, that they stated their leniency only when they're talking about the permitting of the use of foreign seed that was already planted in the 8 amos spaces between the vineyard rows. And maybe they're going to agree with the Tanna Kamma that spaces of at least 16 amos are going to be necessary in order to allow the introduction of foreign seed between the rows to begin with. So I didn't read the Mishnah this way, and there's an opposing view to Rav's view, and this is actually how I read the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says in the name of Rav, so there's 2 interpretations of what Rav is saying of what the Tanaim, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, are saying. So Rabbi Yossi says in the name of Rav, the halacha is that the foreign seed planted between the rows is permitted for benefit after the fact, and furthermore, it is even initially permissible to plant foreign seed there. Now, the idea here is that according to Rabbi Yossi, Rav is saying that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir do not consider rows planted at 8 amos intervals to constitute a vineyard at all. In other words, these are just going to be collections of individual vines. And then what you would be saying is that because these are individual vines, the setback is going to be 6 tefachim from each of these individual vines, and you're not getting up to 4 amos. So if you're saying that between these 3 vines and those 3 vines that they're not going to connect to be a vineyard, then the setback between the 2 sets of vines is only going to be 6 tefachim on this side, 6 tefachim on that side, and then you're going to be allowed to plant foreign seed there. That's a very, very lenient position. That's actually how I read the Mishnah and understood the Mishnah. And the question is, which way is this going to go? Now, certainly, outside of the land, we're going to be getting into leniencies for these sorts of things. And, perhaps what Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir could be saying could be the foundation of how to treat these leniencies outside of the land. But certainly within the land, it's going to go like what the Tanna Kama is saying. The Tanna Kama is saying that an arrangement of 3 or more rows is going to constitute a vineyard as long as the rows are planted within 16 amos of one another. And they're going to combine. And by the way, that's also going to be the conclusion of the Bavli. You could see that in Bavli Baba Batra 83a. And that's also going to be the Halacha L'maisa. So what is the point of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir? And the Gemara is going to try to examine this. And the Gemara says, what does this mean that the foreign seed planted between the rows is permitted for benefit after the fact? And furthermore, even initially it is permitted to plant foreign seed there? Or could it be, or only that the foreign seed planted between the rows is permitted for benefit after the fact, but initially it's prohibited to plant foreign seed there in the space? Now, the question is like this. Did Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi understand Rav's position in accordance with the lenient position of Rabbi Yossi, or with the stringent position of Rabbi Yonah? How do we figure this out? Now, the Gemara is going to respond. It's going to say that we can resolve it on the basis of the following testimony reported by Rabbi Ba. The Gemara says that Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi apportioned my vineyard for me such that its rows would be planted at 8 amma intervals in order to allow the introduction of foreign seed between the rows. Now, this basically is saying, says Amara Fulda, that you have a 6 tefach work area surrounding each of these vines, and these are going to be treated as collections of vines. These are not going to be treated as a vineyard. Now, the Tanna Kama was saying that, wait a second, this is a vineyard. You're going to have a 4 amma setback from these 3 vines. You're going to have a 4 amma setback from these 3 vines. It's going to combine to create an 8 amma space between this and that, and it's going to connect together to make a vineyard. And it's a halachic vineyard in every way. It means that on the outside of the vineyard, you need 4 amma setbacks. It means between there, it's a vineyard, so you can't plant within this 8 amma gap between there. And because it has a halachic status of a vineyard, it would seem very surprising that now we see that, as according to what was reported by Rabbi Ba, that Rabbi Chia Bar Ashi organized this vineyard for him. And basically what's that saying? That's saying that, look, these 3 vines and these 3 vines are not connected as a vineyard, and the setback over on these 3 vines is 6 tefachim, and over there on the closest side of the other 3 vines is 6 tefachim, and now the difference is going to be you basically have 6 amos in between there, between this 6 tefachim. 6 tefachim is going to be an amma for Kilayim. And so basically you have 1 tefachim on one side, or 1 amma on one side, 1 amma on the other side, and 6 amos in the middle that you can plant. That's very surprising. It's going to come that this is going to reflect what it would be like in Hutz La'aretz, outside of the land. But inside of the land, this is not the halacha. Tanna Kama rule, you can't do this. So if you're going to look at this layout, it would look like this layout is going to fit the idea of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, where they're saying that you can plant within, between these intervals. All you're doing is creating a 6 tefachim setback, because these are treated as individual vines. Now, the other way to look at it is going to be that you are allowed to plant within this area. You're not allowed to plant within the area, but if it was planted within the area, that it would be permitted for benefit. So the implication is that Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, either they're talking about a case about Hutz La'aretz, or if they're talking about within Eretz Yisrael, they're saying that perhaps they would even agree with the Tanna Kama about the vineyard, but that if somebody planted within this space, it's going to be allowed. And that, by the way, would be implying that perhaps this 8 amos gap is going to be lenient because it's a derabanan thing. So this, by the way, is not the halacha l'maisa, but we want to understand the minority opinion. So what's going on here? Now, the Gemara is going to continue, and it's going to say that this conduct of Rabbi Chia bar Ashi in laying out this vineyard tells us that when he said in the name of Rav that the halacha accords with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, he meant that the foreign seed planted between the rows is permitted after the fact, and furthermore, initially, it is permitted to plant foreign seed in that space. So the Rambam in Hilchos Kilayim 7.4 is ruling in accordance with the conclusion of this Yerushalmi that we're talking about, that even numerous rows do not combine with one another to form a vineyard if they're separated by 8 amos or more. So Rambam's prohibiting the introduction of foreign seed within the 4 amma work area surrounding the vineyards. But what about within this space between the vineyards? Now, the Ravad is going to be saying that the Yerushalmi's conclusion here is that it's in accordance with the Tanakama that the arrangement of 3 or more vines constitutes a vineyard as long as the rows are planted within 16 amos of one another. And that, by the way, is going to be in consistency with the Bavli. Now, the question is going to be, how do we look at this and how do we lay out a vineyard, and can these vines connect together? So certainly 8 amos or more, you're going to see it as a collection of vines, but 8 amos or less, the idea is that this is not a collection of vines. These are going to connect together to be a vineyard. Now, the Gemara is going to talk about another incident. Rav Huna planted his vineyard with leeks, and they did not leave any space at all between the seeds and the vines. And that, by the way, is going to be very surprising. How can you not leave any space at all? And the Gemara is going to question Rav Huna's actions. He's going to say, but is this not prohibited on account of the law of Kilayim? In other words, you have to have setbacks. What's going on where you're not leaving any setback at all? How can that be? The Gemara is going to answer it. It's going to say that the vines were arranged chaotically. In other words, it's not going to be like in a strip like by Bet Shammai, and it's not going to be like with 2 rows, like with a tail, like what Bet Hillel's saying. And it says that the vines were arranged chaotically in a configuration that precluded it from constituting a vineyard. In other words, what this is saying is that each one was a vine by itself, and the arrangement was not going to constitute a vineyard in any way. The Gemara asks and says, but even still, isn't there going to be a 6 tefach work area for an individual vine? And then within that 6 tefach work area, you can't introduce foreign seed there. So how could it be that he's planting leek very close? So the Gemara is going to explain what happened. And this is going to shed some light and be perhaps part of why we're talking about Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir. So the Gemara answers, says, rather, Rav Huna acted in accordance with the view of Rabbi Yishmael, because Rabbi Yishmael says that there is no prohibition work area whatsoever for an individual vine. Now, Rabbi Yishmael is going to be arguing in the Mishnah in Kilayim 6.1 with the Tanakama about whether a single vine has a 6 tefach work area. Rabbi Akiva is going to be holding that a single vine is going to have a 3 tefach work area, and Rabbi Yishmael is going to be saying that a single vine has no work area whatsoever. So what happened where this Amorah planted leek right next to it? How can that be? Because it happened. And we know that he knows the halacha, so what is going on here that he was doing something so lenient? So the Gemara is going to answer and explain why Rav Huna followed Rabbi Yishmael rather than the Tanakama in the Mishnah in 6.1, and going to be following Rabbi Yishmael that the individual vine is not subject to a 6 tefach work area. Now, certainly the halacha in the land is going to be that there's a 6 tefach work area according to the Tanakama. So the Gemara is going to sum it up, and it's going to finish up chapter 4. And it's going to say that the words of the sages are as follows, that Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi says in the name of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi that the halacha accords outside of the land with the opinion of the one who is lenient. And Rabbi Yaakov Bar Acha said, and so they teach there in Bavel, the halacha outside of the land accords with the opinion of one who is lenient. So the Rosh Hashanah is going to interpret this phase as explaining that what Rav Huna was doing was he was in Bavel, he was Hutzal Aretz, and he was according with the lenient opinion of Rabbi Yishmael that a single vine has no work area whatsoever. So how could Rav Huna follow Rabbi Yishmael and not Rabbi Akiva? And the idea is that with respect to Kilayim, in biblical law, it's applying to Eretz Yisrael. And outside of the land, it's going to be rabbinic. So the halacha outside of Eretz Yisrael is going to follow the lenient view because it's rabbinic. So even if that's only going to be a minority opinion, that's the idea. So that while the halacha in Eretz Yisrael is definitely like the Tanakama in the Mishnah in Kilayim 6.1, who's going to be saying that a single vine has a 6 tefach work area, Rav Huna, who's living in Bavel, follows Rabbi Yishmael's lenient opinion that a single vine has no prohibited work area at all. Now, the Gemara is concluding that the halacha outside of Eretz Yisrael, it would seem to follow Rabbi Yishmael's view that a single vine does not have any prohibited work area at all. And that, again, is going to be the lenient opinion. The Vilna Goan has an issue with that. He's going to be saying that it should be following the opinion of Rabbi Akiva because, that's also a lenient opinion. He's holding that there's 3 tefachim, not that there's going to be like with Rabbi Yishmael with no setback whatsoever. Now, within Eretz Yisrael, the halacha follows the majority opinion. We know that. And that's going to be the ruling of the Tanakama. And, that means that, even rows of groups of 3 or more, when we were talking about with Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir, it means that the setbacks have to be at least 16 amos apart. And if it's going to be more than 16 amos apart, you can put foreign seed there. But less than 16 amos apart, you can't put foreign seed there because it's going to connect together to be a vineyard. This is within the land. And so we follow the Tanakama. And what could the opinion of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir have? Well, that's the minority opinion. That's the lenient opinion. But certainly that lenient opinion would hold outside of the land. In other words, if somebody had a vineyard where there's 3 or more rows and the setbacks are not at 8 amma intervals, but even like a 16 amma interval, then you can plant foreign seed there. And if there's an 8 amma interval and somebody planted foreign seed there, the lenient opinion would be like what Rabbi Yosei would be saying, the lenient opinion, where that you can plant there and harvest there and use it. And if you went with the lenient strict opinion, which is Rabbi Yonah's explanation in the name of Rav, which means that you couldn't do it, but if you did it, you can use the produce. In either way, outside of the land, the opinion of Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Meir would make a lot of sense and hold, but within the land, that's not going to be the halacha l'maisa. So we're going to get into chapter 5 tomorrow, and chapter 5 is going to get more into the laws of the vineyard clearing and regarding a destroyed vineyard. Have a great day.